Carolyn Gilbert is the president and co-founder of New Voodoo Media Services. Lee Jacobs is the EVP of Research Analysis, and I'm Mike O'Connor, marketing guy and former programmer. And this is the top 10 things that we see radio stations make in the research domain. And I think we're up to finding number 8, which is bad questionnaire design. Now, I know you guys will have a lot to say about this.
Well, we see a lot coming from both the client side, and frankly, we see questionnaires from other places that give us pause. You know, one of the challenges that I know we have is clients wanting us to spend too much time asking about them and not enough time asking about the consumer. That's a major question.
It's as though people spend an inordinate amount of their time thinking about what radio stations do on the air, how radio stations could be better for them. The truth of the matter is they spend no time at all. They've got lives. They're busy. So, taking the opportunity to spend some of any interview asking about their lives and thinking about ways that stations can tap into the lives of listeners rather than asking listeners to inform stations about how to program radio is always a better use of time.
Number one for music and fun versus the number one hit music station. Which do you like better? That kind of stuff, right?
And the answer is, I don't care.
Yeah, check a box.
My kid's home from school sick. I don't care.
Right. Speaking of check a box, one of the things that we touched on in one of the earlier countdown segments is the idea of verifying that a respondent is actually doing the work of participating in the research, because we know that there's some vendors that just set it and forget it.
Right. Well, we start with fields that the respondent doesn't even know we collect. We collect latitude and longitude. We collect all kinds of geocoding. We have questionnaire timers, so you can't go pop, 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 pop. We have ways to tell whether people are making little pretty pictures on the grids. And we do test questions, and you'll see these from time to time. What's the weather? Open-ended question. What color is your car? If they say don't know or FGK, yeah, they're gone. And I ask, what are 3 + 3 using words? If the answer is not 6, you don't qualify.
Or you throw them out.
Well, exactly. You go away. Yeah.
Lee, can you tell us what order bias is and how that can screw up a test if you don't fix that?
Well, if we start out sensitizing the respondent to this might be a questionnaire about the top 40 stations in the town where I live, then it throws everything off later. We have to go in a certain order so that we start from, far, far away from the most general and then gradually get more specific. And often at the end of a full-size questionnaire for a perceptual interview, if we need to get down to the specifics, we'll even go the extra step of, a couple of things that we can do to make it feel like the choice of looking at, talking about questions that will deal with one station or another are somehow the respondent's choice, not the choice of the people who designed the questionnaire.
And Carolyn, don't we also change the order of the responses from one respondent to the other?
Oh, yes, especially in music tests. I remember old placement bias for our 600-song music test. The first 100 would test better than everything else. Remember that?
I do.
We scramble, and I mean we scramble. We put our music in pods just for bandwidth considerations, and so we scramble the hooks in each pod, and then we scramble the pods so that literally no respondent hears music in the same order. We also scramble lists, so that if it's a list of what's important to you, that list is going to be different for every person who sees it, so that once again, you're getting rid of placement bias. People tend to like the things at the top more than they like the things at the bottom. You scramble that up and it sort of neutralizes it.
Now, those problems that we've identified here are a lot of times of vendors that are asleep at the wheel or looking for shortcuts who don't do all of these, put these quality controls in place. But radio stations often sometimes blow past the most important thing, which is to actually take the test themselves and make sure it makes sense.
Yes. We encourage that. Some clients do it, some clients just sort of trust us. But whether the client does it or not, we do it.
Right.
We walk through every questionnaire to make sure it flows properly, to make sure the question makes sense, to make sure that everything was copied and pasted properly.
Right.
We try to type as little as possible, just copy and paste. And sometimes that doesn't work either.
And Lee, there's a lot of questions that involve something called branching, where you narrow down respondents and take them on a different path to answer other questions that not every respondent gets. So there can be some huge, colossal mistakes if a research supplier gets it wrong and you don't catch it.
Right.
And it's always, Mike, a matter of having enough people test through the interview. And frankly, people who aren't me or people who aren't Carolyn, somebody who didn't participate in designing the questionnaire, because I typed this 14 times. I sweated over whether it's or nor or this or that. And by the time it gets to the screen in the interview, I'm blind to it. It just is what I think it is in my head. So it's always critical to have a team member who's not familiar with the questionnaire, has no skin in it, to be able to go through the interview for us.
Because let's face it, there can be some really, I know you guys have shared with me some of the bad research questions you've had to try to talk clients out of, or that you've seen on other competitor tests.
One of my favorites, and this is an old one, it's from a major research company from years ago that will go unnamed right now, but they asked this question this way in myriad questionnaires. Do you prefer or dislike accurate weather forecasts? I prefer mine to be inaccurate. I mean, what a ridiculous question. Using modifiers like that within a question, you want to be as neutral as possible. When you're doing polar opposites, make sure they're polar opposites, and keep them as neutral as you possibly can. Because, I mean, folks are just, that's a stupid question. I mean, and they asked it for a generation, actually.
Yeah, I've been on design calls where programmers there's some things they want to know, but their suggested question structure doesn't get us there. Lee, I think you and I worked together in Northeast City. This was back in our days of I was brand managing and you were doing perceptuals. But you remember the compound questions that we'd see about morning shows, like on billboards?
Sure. Yeah, when you listen in the car and see a station billboard, what time of day are you most like? What?
Purple. The answer is purple.
Yeah, I mean, just because you put a question mark at the end doesn't necessarily mean it's a question. There are questions that we've seen, either submitted by a station or, shared with us because it was in their prior study done by another vendor, where the actual answer to the question is yes or no. But it has a question mark at the end and some choices. So that's a question, but it doesn't track for a human who hasn't been thinking about it or isn't thinking about it within the realm of what a station might care about. They're thinking about their lives.
You've always harped on the idea of questions that you should include in a perceptual are things that you can ultimately take action.
Well, sure.
That was exactly what I was just going to say.
Right.
Actionability. If you can't do anything about it, why waste the inventory to ask about it?
Yeah, I mean, in broad generalities, how many times have we been forced to ask the appeal and the familiarity and appeal of the midday host?
After being on the air for a month.
Yeah, nobody has any idea. But I think it was Mike Saklarides, Coast LA, had been there for a generation.
Nobody knows the midday guy.
Yeah.
Nobody ever has. Nobody ever will.
No. Familiar voice, good.
All right, so we do two types of perceptuals. One where you really need a deep answer because you're making a decision perhaps about whether or not to leave the format or about making wholesale changes that are strategic or a more traditional perceptual. And then we, of course, have a less expensive, quicker in and out when there's just a few tactical things you want to know. Let's start with the big one, because I think one of the issues is that I remember working for the in the CBS days, paying well over $45,000 for a market perceptual. Is that still the going rate?
For some, not for us. You can get a 400 to 600 good sample in a fairly major, mid-sized to major market. Our perceptuals run anywhere from 18 to 30 at tops, but that's for a massive sample.
Mhm.
I know there are companies out there doing them for $45,000, $50,000, $60,000 a pop. Fine, if you want to buy them a house, we're not buying houses here. We're in an industry that really needs help. So as I've said before, we charge a fair rate, not a greedy rate. And the rates I see out there are really greedy.
The old adage in Wall Street, or someone would ask, is where are the clients' yachts?
Yeah.
And then we've got the tactical perceptual,
Right.
the one I think we call it the ASAP study.
We call
Yes.
it the ASAP because it's focused on being actionable. We're talking about an interview that's half the length of what we'd do for a full-size perceptual study. No, it's half the questionnaire length. So you need to go into the project knowing what you want at the other end. What decision are we making? And it can't be, well, do we want to shift a little bit that way and have the morning guy talk? No. This is really as single pointed as we can. What's the one thing you want to know? Because through the interview, we want to make sure that we're going to be able to look at the ultimate answer that you were trying to get a couple of different ways. Because one question results saying that, oh yeah, we should definitely pull the trigger is good, but a couple of different ways of slicing that apple gives us a lot more confidence in saying, yep, time to go.
Pick your purse, pay your bills, that kind of thing.
We look at single focus. Is it the morning show you want to deal with? Is it your music positioning you want to deal with? This is an or, not an and. You pick a direction and go. But it's got to be focused. It's a focused sample where we're looking at 300 very targeted listeners in your market to make these 1-2 decisions tops in a 10-minute interview.
But we'd so much rather, we designed it under the thought that there are stations that we've talked to over the years where, well, we've been trying to figure this out for a while, but we're going to wait for our next perceptual in 12 months, which might get canceled, or 18 months, which is an awfully long time away. So for under $10,000, if we can go in the field with a nice size sample, 300 respondents, well screened, and get the answer you need, that often pays for itself.
Yep.
Let's get in touch with these guys. Tell me more at newvoodoo.com. If you'd like to see some of the other findings we've gotten so far, we're up to number 7 will be in our next video. You can go to newvoodoo.com/webinars.
New Voodoo builds digital products and conducts research and marketing campaigns for clients.
It's easy to get in touch. Drop us a line at tellmemore@newvoodoo.com.